Yeah, good idea. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Doing another fun fantasy nerd chat with my fantasy nerd friends, Mask, aka Tristram, and also Dusty Cubes, aka Woke Centrist, aka Dustin Cubit, aka Shady Centrist, and I am Andrew, aka Maya Mindgasms. I've declared myself a Maya because we're talking about our predictions for what will happen in the upcoming Lord of the Rings show that's supposed to come out this
Oh,
September called The Rings of Power. So I wanted to just briefly speculate with you guys about what'll happen because we know it takes place in the Second Age, and the Silmarillion covers a lot of what happens during the Second Age. So there could be a lot of interesting stuff that could potentially happen in there. So, yeah, I guess we briefly mentioned before that I think it's interesting that we could easily see the rise of Sauron because we see
yeah.
him like his full backstory as a servant of Morgoth, and is it Morgoth or Melchior? I confuse those two
No,
sometimes.
I think Melkor is
uh,
first, and then he becomes Morgoth, and then
Oh, okay, okay. And
yeah.
yeah, you
Well,
mentioned
Sauron is not either. Sauron is kind of a servant.
yeah. He's like
yeah, like
he's
the
two
Elder
below the
King.
hierarchy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um.
you
Me-
would mention last time too, Tristram, that the we see the like with the men who get the nine rings, we see them become the Nazgul,
yeah,
and
I'd
we
love
also
that.
see characters and places that either happen or I mean are in the Lord of the Rings or are mentioned, like the fall of Numenor, the fall of
Mm,
Gondolin. We see the last of
yeah.
the Balrogs killed in the Silmarillion, except for the one that
Well, yeah.
kind of
Except.
kills Gandalf. Gandalf's in there. Galadriel's in there. Elrond's father is in there, and yeah,
Mm.
there's all sorts of interesting stuff. So, uh, yeah, you
I
start
think
off, Tristram. What do you think is the most interesting stuff that could potentially happen?
one. I want to throw out one thing. First of all, that I think they're aiming for obvious. Like this is a huge series, extremely expensive. They're not intending to do just one series, right? They're not intending to do just one series. So I think they're going to go for a few series. And some of the things I definitely expect Numenor's Drowned to be in one of the series, but I don't expect that to be series one. That's that. I'm just throwing that out there. I think series one will be Sauron, not yet evil, and we'll see Sauron's fall. And then in a later series, two or three, we'll see Numenor drowned. The thing I would most like to see is the Nazgul plotline. I would love to see that. And I don't know if you've seen any of the sort of like advertising. They've done these posters which just show people from the neck to the waist kind of thing, holding an artifact of different kinds. And one of the things that's been remarked is that a lot of those people are wearing rings, like a lot of them. And some of them are clearly dwarves, some are clearly elves, some are clearly men. But remember, men in this age, we're talking about the men of Numenor. So we're not talking about like the people of Rohan and stuff like that. We're talking about them when men could live much longer and were greater
Yeah,
than their
yeah,
than. So
and
it's going to be interesting to see that, and I think we will see the rings done, and I think they're gonna hopefully go into which Tolkien doesn't really what the rings actually do, which will be pretty cool.
yeah, that'll be interesting. And yeah, like you mentioned, the blood of Numenor. That's how we see that in the Lord of the Rings series with how uh how Aragorn is the heir to the King of Gondor, and
Yes,
the kings of Gondor they have the bloodline of the blood of Numenor, and
will
yeah,
last a little bit.
in terms of the rings too. I know you had mentioned last time we briefly discussed this, Dusty, the guy who creates the rings. You said they get a little bit into that in the Shadow of Mordor video game, right?
Mm.
Yeah, by the time of Shadow of Mordor, Celebrimbor is a avenging wraith, and
What?
he is because there's the way Shadow of Mordor works is that it's about 800 years before Lord of the Rings, and Rangers' jobs were to patrol the borders of Mordor. There was a ranger whose family was slaughtered, and Celebrimbor appears to this ranger as a wraith to help him get vengeance. So Celebrimbor's story is a little bit talked about. You know, he was the creator of the rings. So in the game, you're
Well,
able to use Celebrimbor's power to assist you,
yeah.
which is
And
mostly
it's
just like being able to see things as a spirit and stuff like that, and shoot magic, because the ranger himself is just a ranger. He doesn't have any magical powers. So the wraith will shoot out like magical arrows and imbue him with strength and things like that.
cool.
So
I didn't know
it's an
that. That
interesting
sounds
plot.
awesome.
Yeah,
And
and
one of the
during this
interesting
time, also Gollum is actually active, so you do run into Gollum as well.
Oh, that's why you mentioned when we were discussing it before. I said that in the prologue of the first movie, and we know from the books too that that Gollum has been around for at least 500 years. So if the video game is also canon, then like you just said, he's at least 800 years old in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to find out. Like, I know Gollum's been around for ages. Just not know how long he's been actual Gollum versus, a hobbit transforming into a Gollum. But by the time that the game takes place, he's fully Gollum.
just briefly touching on what Dusty said there on the creator of the rings, Celebrimbor. It's important to note that I think that's going to be a big plot hook in the series arc, because he creates the rings of power. So I think he'll be a major character, but he doesn't create them alone. Sauron is involved in the creation of all the rings except the 3 he made for the Elven Kings under the sky. So, and I think that's going to be an important plot hook, and that's why.
Oh, I didn't remember that. So why
That's
is
lore.
that? Okay.
So
Okay.
Sauron used to be like beautiful, right? He was, a Maya. Remember, the Valar is Melkor. Morgoth was a Valar, like one of the gods, and
Right.
Sauron is a Maiar. So he's on the sort of level of the Astari, like Gandalf.
Kind of like on Gandalf's
Gandalf.
level, right?
Yeah.
They're all Maya. They're all basically kinds of almost like angels. They're immortals, but
Yeah.
they're not the
That's
Valar.
how Melkor is kind of like
Lucifer,
Satan in like if you look at
the son
what's
of the
that?
morning.
Yeah, like Paradise Lost. I think I've
Paradise
heard
Lost.
before that Paradise Lost by John Milton. You would probably know more about this than me, Tristram, because you're Christian. I think I had heard before that Paradise Lost by John Milton is actually where this notion came from of Satan being a fallen angel rather than the Bible itself. Is that true?
There is a couple of lines in the Bible. Lucifer is a biblical word, and it does mean light bringer. So there is like some intent, and the words "son of the morning" also come from the Bible. However, that he was an actual angel is never stated or anything of that nature. But there is those little points that could be suggestible. But what Milton does with his layers of hell and all this jazz is definitely an extra layer, if you like. And Dante's Inferno, a lot of people talk about Dante's Inferno as if that's scripture as well.
Right. Right.
So you've got to consider, like, it's like when someone did fanfic and people just picked it up and thought it was the next book of the Bible. Pretty cool.
Right.
But hey, some people would say the two are similar because for some people they're both equally fictional. So, but yes, there is hints in the Bible, but it's literally just a couple of verses, and nothing
Okay.
explicit.
Okay.
But in the lore as it's become now, that's a very well known thing, and certainly it's something that would have been known to Tolkien. And but one of the cool things is it's always cool to have like a favorite son who goes bad, right?
Mhm.
That's just it's just a great storyline. But I just think it's really interesting that he was on the ringmaker side, helping forge. He was a master ringmaker. And the reason he's helping is as he's helping, he's figuring out how to make the master ring that will rule the others. And like sometimes people think he just made the one ring and somehow it took over the others. No, he planted in his work. He was working undercover for years. And I don't know exactly how it's going to play it. I'd really like it to play it that he started off kind of thinking that maybe he'd go good. And then he's like, oh, but if I take the one ring, I could actually be in control of all this. I hope they play it like that and have him like actually have like a fall. Like that he was like the planted spy, but that he almost didn't. I think that would be a really interesting, really like get your teeth into kind of thing. Whereas if they just play him as like, you know, Emperor Palpatine, like super evil, just from day one, I think we might lose a little bit of the thrill. I'm not saying that'd be wrong. I think Tolkien shows him as very straight up evil. But I think if I was
Lord
going
of
to
the
be
Rings.
if I was going to run this show, that's what I would go for. Like watching, like have it be about tragic falls, the tragic fall of Melk of not of Morgoth. Morgoth's already fallen. Of Sauron, and then later on how he uses that to create the fall of Numenor. I think that would be awesome. I think that would be legendary. I will really enjoy it if it's that. It's going to be weird though because they're obviously in a place where they're writing their own lore, so some people ain't going to be happy because they're going to be like the rings do cool powers, and there people are going to be like, nope. So I've decided this isn't written. Just enjoy it. It's its own thing. Let's go. I'm looking forward to it.
Because
outside
of
awesome.
like outside of a couple different stories, they're gonna have a lot of leeway to like play around with the lore. Because if they ever cover, you know, what's that, Huron or what's the other story?
Which one?
Well, this Huron story, which is fairly detailed. And there you go. Yeah, that story that's fairly detailed that they can't play around with too much. But a lot of the other lore is pretty loose.
Yeah, and they can make like you were saying when we were talking about Wheel of Time, Tristram. I think if I remember correctly, kind of all three of us agree that probably the same is the case for this. That probably all three of us agree that as long as the lore keeps to the spirit of the actual lore in the main books, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and Tolkien's other writings like that were published posthumously, like the Silmarillion and Book of Lost Tales and all that kind of stuff, as long as it maintains the spirit of what's happening in the books, I think that's fine. Like we talked before too about how there are mostly small changes in the Lord of the Rings that don't really impact the broader story that much. So as long as they keep to that sort of thing, I think could be really interesting. And yeah, it would be really interesting too if they show the fall of Sauron and the corruption of his character. Like he is more just like full on evil in Lord of the Rings, and well, especially Lord of the Rings, of course, right? But it would be really interesting to see him just being a morally good person and then being corrupted by power, because that would be really fitting with the extended metaphor throughout the series of being corrupted by the power of the ring. And yeah, in terms of Melkor too, that's indicative of all the different types of mythology and different cultural traditions that Tolkien integrated even into the different languages that he created in the Lord of the Rings. Like there are some Christian influences, but it's obviously far less of a direct Christian allegory as something like Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. And then he has like Old Norse and old Celtic mythology in there, and all kinds of other roots to everything that happens too.
Yeah, that's definitely what he was going for. Tolkien wasn't even necessarily trying to write a novel. He was trying to write a mythology for Britain, because he felt it really sad that Britain really lacked a mythology. A lot of our most ancient tales are actually not even English. They're like Welsh or
he was trying
Nordic.
to make like an Anglo-Saxon mythology in particular, right?
Correct. Absolutely. And that's why when you look at the Rohirrim, you see so much of like that sort of Anglican style from the old pre sort of more Saxon era. But one of the reasons I think this could work so well is in a way even better than Wheel of Time is there's so much less written, right? There's so much more leeway. If you look at Gandalf's magic and how much we know about it compared to how much we know about Nynaeve's, it's much more difficult for even a Tolkien scholar to pick fault with what Gandalf does, because very little is actually said. Like it's about like the words that they use have indicative power, and things like that. It's like very, very little of it was like, and Sauron can shoot black blasts of power. That isn't. It's never stated. It's just like if he gets the ring, he'll win. But he doesn't actually say like what that will fricking do. And so that allows the show to show pretty much whatever within that scope. And like for example, what we know about the rings, like we know the elven rings are after elements, right? So water and fire, and sky. But what they actually do is very unclear. And so when the show does what it does, like you say, as long as it stays roughly within the Tolkien-esque feel, I don't think even Tolkien scholars are really going to be able to gainsay it. They can say, well, that isn't what Tolkien said. Yeah, but Tolkien never did say. And so that allows the imagination to just go with it. And I think that's one of the problems that the Wheel of Time has had with its fans, is that Jordan wrote these 14 huge, thick tomes that had so much detail in. So there's loads of things to go, you see. But with Tolkien, that's not the case. And so I think that's actually going to be an asset for the Second Age, the Rings of Power show.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about that, Dusty?
Yeah, I think it should be because they have so much leeway. It's going to be fairly interesting. That's what I thought about the game that I played, because it's steeped in lore, but that lore isn't completely detailed and completely mapped out. So they're allowed to play with a lot of what's going on. So you get to see this whole war going on in Mordor, but this is never anything discussed in any of the books. But they pull from lore to make the setting and story work. So I know they're going to probably be pulling closer to lore with the show, since it's about direct events, but those events are not super detailed. I remember reading the Silmarillion, and outside of those 2 or 3 stories, they just give you kind of like almost a bullet point version of history. They do go over some conversations, but the conversations are like almost paraphrased. You don't hear a lot of quotations outside of, the actual stories where they actually do focus on some characters. But if you're talking something like Feanor and, how he defected, there's very little like character to character dialogue within that story. Yep. So they have a lot to play with there.
Yeah,
again,
for sure.
It's recounted more like a myth or more like scripture, right? Like in things like the Bible or the Quran. If you read the Quran, you'll find that often it says like, this person said he would go, and then he did, and he smote them, and they all died. Right? And like it's things like that. Like it's summarized because it isn't the person themselves telling you; it's someone recounting those events after the fact. and more as a legend, more as something that they heard once from someone who has passed this on, than actually physically saw the event. So it's very different from the POV kind of style that we have in the Lord of the Rings itself and in the Wheel of Time itself. So it's like Dusty said.
Yeah, it's like if they made a Wheel of Time spinoff about Tom's story about Mosk and Merc,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah, it's basically that level of detail, and then trying to extrapolate from there.
Or like what you know about Jane Farstrider, right? He went on loads of cool adventures and stuff happened. And you kind of,
Yeah,
he went this place and he saw that. And at one point he brought in this dangerous male channeler. But that's it. Like you don't actually get any of the detail. And a lot of Tolkien is like that.
right.
Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, the
excited.
so it's interesting too. It'll be interesting if we see some of the characters that are in the Silmarillion that we know go forward to be in Lord of the Rings, like I mentioned. So it would be really cool if we see Gandalf and Galadriel and
Yep.
Glorfindel, who we know goes on to be the one who
Yep.
actually saves Frodo at the beginning of
Yep.
Fellowship in the Ring, who killed the second last Balrog during the fall of Gondolin, and it would be really interesting to see those. But I assume that if they do that, they're going to do that with new actors. At least it seems that way. So if they do that, I hope that it works out well. What do you guys think about that in terms of whether they use different actors?
I don't think they have I don't think they have any obligation to be necessarily continuous with the Jackson timeline. I don't think, I think it would be a pretty fanatical fan who'd have a problem with that, especially considering one of the key points, is, of course, is the elves are ageless.
Right.
Ageless. They do not age. Like, so Elrond should look exactly the same now as he looks in 2,000 years. And that just cannot be done with human actors. Not unless we go full CG, and no one wants that. So
Right.
just create someone who is at least we can buy it and then just move on. But having said that, I do think the look of the film does look Jackson-esque. They look like they've gone for the same sort of quite gritty feel, that it feels very real, like a used world with like really steel weapons and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they've used some of the same sort of standards, because it looks very good. It looks like it's used practical effects. When you look at the costuming in the posters, they look extremely practical, like we saw in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and to me that's all a good sign. But I certainly don't expect Kate Blanchett to step onto the screen as a younger Galadriel. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just don't
And,
I just
or
don't think
like
that's
Ian
possible
McKellen
20
to
years
play
on.
Gandalf, or like Ian McKellen to play Gandalf again. Yeah,
20 years on, it's too big an
yeah,
ask.
yeah.
That's what I think.
None of the actors were expecting to even come back for the Hobbit movies, really.
No. But it's a big difference when you're like literally 20 years on, even more, right? Because the Lord of the Rings films were filmed together in the late 90s, and you think it's 2022. You know, some of these people, like Ian McKellen, Sir Ian McKellen, is not a young man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
for
even
sure.
by The Hobbit, like when The Hobbit came out, like
It
what's the
was tough.
actor that plays Sauron? He was
Oh, you
like
mean
Saruman?
that
You mean Saruman? Christopher Lee?
Saruman.
He's dead,
Yeah,
right?
he was
Christopher
like
Lee.
Yeah,
visibly like I could see, man, this
yeah.
guy is
Well,
not really
Struggling.
also
up to the
they
job.
they also they also came to him and filmed his episodes on a green screen so he wouldn't have to fly because he was too old to fly
Yeah.
anymore at that time.
Yeah, he was like
Yeah.
barely hanging on. I was like, oh man, he's like super old now,
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so
visibly.
I think you have to just be sensible, realistic. As Logan Nine Fingers would say, sometimes you just have to be realistic.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Or you can go the route that everyone's been going now, is just CG, like the younger characters into the movies. Like they've been
But
doing that pretty much with all the Star Wars movies.
well,
And they're doing
Even in
it. They've been doing
It's
that with some of the Terminator movies too, and I'm sure a lot
it's
of the other
tricky.
ones as well. Yeah.
It's
It doesn't
tricky though,
seem
isn't it?
like the CG is well like works well enough to make that convincing yet, I think.
But one
Mm,
of the problems we have is the Uncanny Valley, right? So when you have
mhm,
something that looks really, really human but isn't, then there's something that just makes us not like it. And
mm,
I've seen it done. Like I had that problem with the live action. This is going to sound weird because I'm not going to use a human as an example. The live action Lion King, where they used loads of CGI there to be the lions, and they
mhm,
really look like realistic lions, but there's just something off. And someone showed me a version of it where they have more cartoony eyes, and it's just so much more appealing. Even though in every other way they're still lying, it's just like because it's like, look, I'm not pretending. I know I'm a fake lion. You know I'm a fake lion, and it did look just more appealing. And I'm like, I don't know why my brain's doing that because it's not on purpose. But that uncanny valley thing, it exists, and
right.
so there is something that if we see someone who just looks like they should be human, but we know that there's something in our brain knows they're not, it does make us uncomfortable on some level. I don't know why
Yeah,
that is.
yeah.
Mhm,
I
Yeah,
don't know why that is.
that's why it still seems like CG works better with things that we don't know exist, like
Yep,
dragons or monsters or animals
yep,
or
yep.
things like that. And yeah, it's the uncanny valley, like you mentioned, and uh, yeah, that's interesting too. Like if we know things are supposed to look a certain way, and then they almost look too real to actually be real, like they're not blemished or flawed enough, then we want them to look more cartoonish, like you said. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's weird. I think our brains are just better than any computer, and there's something in us that has an innate recognition. That's what I think, but I don't know that. It's just a guess. But anyway, I'm super stoked for this series, though. It looks
Yeah.
amazing. I think it's going to be really well done. It's incredible. I think it's the highest budget TV show of all time.
Oh
I'm
wow.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be.
yeah.
I just really, really want it to succeed. I think it's going to be freaking awesome.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. So let's talk about the rings themselves and those who have them. So we know that the men have 9 rings. The dwarves have do
Seven.
the dwarves have seven rings, and then the
Yes.
elves have 3, right? Am I
3.
missing any
Mhm,
there? Other
And
than
then the
Sauron's
one
ring,
ring,
of course.
and then the one ring to rule them all. There
Right.
are lesser rings. It says in the Silmarillion the elves made lots of magic rings, but these were like practice pieces. They're not important to the story, and we never really talk about them. So they exist, but they're not going to be part of any story. The three
Okay.
rings of the Elven Kings are the most explained. They're all named individually. They've got colors. They've got elements. You know, it's fire, water, and air, um, and they all have like different names. Like he loved that, didn't he? You know, Tolkien. Like he loved multiple names. Like everyone has 6 or 7
mhm.
names, and like the rings have like a bunch of names. Like it's not just like the fire ring. It's like it's Narya, Nenya, and Nar. I can't even say it. Nenya, Narya, and Vilya, something like that. As a 3, I can't pronounce them
Good
right.
job
Please
of
don't
remembering
criticize me.
those.
And well, Narya is the one that Gandalf's holding. It's
Right.
the ring of fire, and but sometimes that's called the red ring, whereas Nenya, the water ring, is called the ring of adamant. I think she even says that in the movie, the ring of adamant. But you know what's the thing I wanted to bring up when I knew we were going to do this is the air ring. We know who's got that, right? Elrond,
Hmm.
and that's the dominant ring. Why'd they call it that? I don't know. I'm like, oh, is that going to be part of it? That like he's
Mm,
actually this got them is like dominant ring is you would think that'd be the name they would keep for the one ring, right? Because that's actually dominating
Hmm.
the others. So I
Oh
just
yeah, that's
wondered.
interesting.
It really did interest me. I was like, oh, that's super super interesting to me that there's this that it was called the dominant ring, and that's from Tolkien. That's like an
Hmm.
actual. quotes. And so the other rings have way less information. Like the seven rings for the dwarves, all we know is that that there's seven dwarf clans, so it would make sense that there was one each, and they were lost. Like, and when they go looking in the Hobbit, one of the things they were hoping to find was like one of the lost rings. Like say, oh, maybe we'll find the ring that this guy lost.
You mean
It was only
in
like mentioned.
Smog? They thought they might find that in Smog's lair.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't Smog's lair originally, was it? It was the ancient dwarven kingdom, and
Right,
so they were
right.
hoping that would be. It's mentioned briefly, but they say, nah, it ain't here pretty early on. But
What was it?
but
Oh,
it's just
what was it
yeah.
called before? Before it was Moria, or what's the Elven name or whatever it is? I
No,
can't remember.
Moria is where they go in the Lord of the Rings. Um, Smaug's lair is the
Oh
ancient
yeah, it's not in
dwarven
the same
kingdom.
place. I forgot that.
No,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it. Like they call it Erebor,
Erebor. Yeah.
but it's very different from Moria, even though they're both dwarven kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's one of the cool things, right? We could see like the dwarven kingdoms at their height, and they will totally want to play with that, right? They'll totally want to play with that.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see Moria because that's a place that's founded later, but we could totally see Erebor, and that would be really really cool. But anyway, we'll find out. But we know that that like Thrain had one because he was that's mentioned in the Hobbit, but
Mm-hmm.
like ages ago it was lost, and
Yeah.
the all of the rings were lost, whereas the nine are not lost, which is why I think they're going to be really interesting, because obviously they were the
Mm-hmm.
nine kings and all fall. And like, do you
Yeah.
think like the Witch King of Agmar, like we're going to see him as a human and see what
That would be
happens?
really fucking cool.
It
I'm
will.
so stoked to see that if it happens.
I better. It
Yeah.
really better. Like, I don't want to miss that. That would be just like, it's just such a good opportunity, right? Like, because
Yeah.
what they could do again, if I was the showrunner, which I'm clearly not, I would be like, right, series one, I do the fall of Sauron, right? And then at the end, he falls, but no one knows he's fallen. And then he gets all in the next series, he starts picking off the nine kings, and they do that thing where they make you believe that maybe they're just gonna not fall, and then of course they all fall because we actually know they fall, and it's gonna be cool to see like, but how will it happen when this guy's such a good dude? He
Yeah.
wouldn't fall,
It
and then he does. Yeah, wow,
it would be
Sauron.
really cool. It'd be really cool too if we see Melchior um uh corrupting corrupting Sauron, like we
Yeah.
see that he's not the big chief bad guy and that he was
Mm,
corrupted by another too. That would be
yeah.
interesting as well.
It would be freaking it really interesting, and like I yeah, and maybe even like seeing Ungoliant, the original,
Mhm.
because Ungoliant's technically on the same level. It's like Maya, if you like, demon rather than angel.
Yeah,
But like,
yeah.
because Ungoliant was like what destroyed the trees, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Mhm.
big deal. And so it would be wow, I don't know, it'd be really cool, and it could be like a shout out to Shelob, and
Yeah,
like
yeah. She's the like you said,
the
she's kind of like god level status of the giant spiders, right?
well, angel level status. She isn't
Yeah.
like Valar.
Yeah,
She's
angel
Maya.
level, like my level, like demigod status. That's another
Yeah,
fascinating
absolutely.
thing in the Silmarillion too, that we know that that the wizards like Gandalf are Maya, so they're demigods, which is
Yeah.
interesting. That's like why we see at the end of the Return of the King that Gandalf's mission is done, so he can leave Middle Earth now because he's there to stop Sauron from destroying the world with the power of the One Ring.
Yeah, and also the idea is like Tolkien wanted us to think almost that it could have become Earth, like the time of magic has passed. So elves were
Hmm.
magical. Now it's time for men who aren't magical to take over the world, and obviously that's what the age we're in now. where men without magic are doing everything. And like that's why
Mm-hmm.
elves had to go, and that's why dragons had to go, and that's why magic rings had to go, because they were of a bygone era where magic ruled, and now is the age of men. And that's why even
Yeah.
Sam, who only held the ring for a very short time, eventually even Sam takes the boat. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
yeah,
true. Yeah. Yeah, it's really
it's gonna be cool.
yeah, I'm so excited to see what happens in it. Yeah. Well,
Oh, what do you
I guess
think?
we've kind of sorry, go ahead.
Just one last thing. Do you think they'll have all five wizards? Because I think they will.
Oh, that would be really cool. Yeah, I want to see all five of them. So
Because
which ones are all five of them? So there's
so
Gandalf the Gray, Sauron the White, Radagast the Brown, and what are
and the
the other
two
two? There's a
blues,
blue one. There are
they're
two
both
blues.
blue. And you're
Okay.
like, come on, man, that doesn't make sense. You had all the others have their own color. Why would you have two blues? But he never tells us anything about them. They're like a footnote. But the thing is, that's exactly what this show's made for, right? Is to go, oh, there's almost nothing about these guys. We're going to totally do tons with them because we can, because there's nothing written, so we're not contradicting anything. That's what I'm voting for. I really think we'll see that, and we'll see it would be cool if we see an unadulteratedly good Saruman as well, like Saruman the full white. Oh yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I
Because
I
like
hope so.
throughout all of the Silmarillion, he's still on the side of the good, right?
Well, yeah, for it's like, and for thousands and thousands of years
Yeah,
afterwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So
It's not
Yeah.
until the third age
Saruman only
until he.
gives up because he believes there's no beating Sauron. Like he only gives
Mm-hmm.
up because
Yeah.
he comes to believe it's impossible to win, and then yeah, that like he was not like I'm diabolically evil. It wasn't that way. He just gave up and it's like, well, if you can't win, you might as well enjoy the trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Oh,
Anyway,
another thing I just remembered is don't we see the creation of the Palantirs as well?
well, no, that was before this, surely.
That was before the Second
I
Age?
think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. No, sorry. I did not listen to you properly, Andrew. You
Oh,
said
okay.
Palantirs. I thought Silmarils. I don't know why I'm not. I should just listen to what you're actually
Oh,
saying.
okay.
Yeah, we
Okay.
could see the creation of the Palantirs, the five seeing stones.
Right, right.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, that could totally be it. I don't know if we will. I hadn't even thought of that. Hadn't even thought of that. That could be cool.
I
That could be
only
really
thought
cool.
of that because I just remembered that I saw Daniel Green talking about that in in his prediction video about it.
Ah. Oh, well, that's cool. No, I hadn't even thought about it, but that could totally be a thing. That could totally be a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. So anything else you guys can think of that could be interesting that could possibly happen?
Hmm, not sure. There's such a wide amount of material that they could pull from. So I don't
Yeah,
even know how much of that they're going to cover and how many seasons are they planning? Do we even know that?
I don't
We
know.
don't.
No.
But I'll be gobsmacked if it's one. It won't be
Yeah,
one.
me too. Oh, they
Um,
definitely want to milk that for all as much
but
as they can within reason, I'm sure.
I
Yeah.
think we're going to know a lot once we see episode one, right? Because one of the key things I don't know is the second age is a very, 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 very long time, and so
Hmm.
if they start it with like the flat world and the trees, then we might be seeing Beren and Luthien and all sorts. If they start it with like the world being round and Morgoth's defeats already happened,
Hmm.
and we're talking Sauron's first downfall, which is where I think we'll start it, then we know this basically we're going to move on to the downfall, the creation of the rings, Numenor, and Valinor, like moving away from Arda, like where like they travel there on the boats. You didn't used to
Hmm.
have
Right.
to, and so they may cover that like basically the fall of Sauron is what makes that happen. And of course, it's all wibbly wobbly, right? There's no like, well, how did that happen? It's never explained. It's just it's like the heavens separated from the earth. Oh, did it? And then you get there by boat. Good to know.
Hmm.
Good to know. And so, like, don't think about it too hard. Um, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like that, once I know when the date they're going for is going to be, I think that will predicate a lot of what's coming. I don't think they're going to go for the dawn, like with the trees. I don't think they'll do that because it's just they're going to lose like people who aren't utter Tolkien nerds because it isn't like very gettable, but like normal countries with like uh, Numenor and different kingdoms that they can play with. You can go Game of Thrones ish. You can go Wheel of Time ish. People are going to dig that. I think that's what'll
Hmm.
happen. But until we see it, I just don't know. These guys are crazy. They're doing a Lord of the Rings show. They're nuts. They could do anything.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to it. I really, really am. I think it looks sweet, and I'm going to be able to enjoy this in a better way than I'm going to be able to enjoy the Wheel of Time because I'm not as attached to Lord of the Rings as I am to the Wheel of Time. And Lord of the Rings also is more, like I said, it's so much more open. There's so much little less written that I'm just going to be able to dig my teeth into it. And I just think it's going to be a sensational, sensational choice.
Yeah,
Can't believe
yeah.
it's
I'm
happening in my
I'm
lifetime. Go.
Yeah, it's so awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it too. I actually
Yeah.
am more invested, I think, because I like Lord of the Rings more than
Yeah,
Wheel of
I know you
Time.
do.
But I
Mhm.
know, but I love the Lord of the Rings movies, and I watched them before I
Yeah.
ever read the books. And I also am a defender of the Hobbit movies, even though a lot of hardcore Lord of the Rings fans hate those. So I'm really excited to see where this will go, and I think I'll probably enjoy it too. I think
Oh, you definitely will.
yeah. I think you, Dusty, are that's Wheel of Time is your favorite fantasy series, right? So you're more invested in that than Lord of the Rings as well. But I know you're a huge Lord of the Rings fan too, of course.
Yeah, like my expectations aren't as high for Lord of the Rings. Like I won't be like utterly disappointed if they go off script and stuff like that. But
Right.
it's because, they're going so far back with stuff that has very few emotional attachment to characters that they can play around like that. When you're getting into like character development, something like Wheel of Time, it's very difficult to play in that playground without fundamentally changing something about these characters that makes them different. Because I was just watching another follow-up um, discussion about the first season of Wheel of Time, Sanderson, and like he talks about his favorite character is Perrin. So he's very, very critical on how his path in particular takes in the Wheel of Time. He says he's pretty optimistic and about the whole thing. I think he gave it like a 7 if he were to rank the whole series. But
Yeah, I think that's
it,
what he said. Yeah.
yeah, it's I think it's so easy to play with mythology than it is to play with character stories. It's just the way it is. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how most adaptations are much better received when that's the case. They were
Hmm.
talking about like, Greek mythology. I know we covered a series that like went into Greek mythology,
Yeah. I was just thinking about that one too. Yeah.
and then even like the comic books. Most people aren't meticulous enough to go into the actual comic books and read them. Most people just kind of have an idea of the essence of a character. Nobody goes
Hmm.
back into these weird storylines from the 70s and 80s and with all these different writers and everything. They just know, okay, Spider-Man, he swings from webs and he cracks jokes. So as long as you stick to that, we'll love it.
Yeah.
It's they have kind of the same deal. I think that's why also the superhero movies are so successful because most people in their own minds don't have like a meticulous um, overview of hey, what was written about this character? Let's take a look at Amazing Spider-Man issue 78. Oh man, they're way off base here. Like nobody freaking thinks about it that way. And
Right.
the ones that do are like they have to be completely dedicated to that material. Like nobody is really dedicated because you got to think how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of issues of Spider-Man have been released since the inception of this character. It's almost impossible to keep up with all the storylines and different comic books that he's appeared in. So that's why I
Yeah.
think these superhero movies get a little better reception, and nerds aren't so crazy about
Yep.
when they make little changes here and there. People just don't mind because
Yeah. There isn't a
just
canon, right? There isn't like
Hmm.
one
there is
canon.
a canon. It's just so wide and vast that
But like
most single people don't know that canon.
but for like because I've been following comic books for about 30 years, and one of the things is a lot of them have multiple canons. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, there's a
Right.
Yeah.
canon, but there's multiple canon. So like there's like the because they just go with the multiverse, right? And so they're like, well,
Yeah, there's
in this
many different
version,
versions
all
of
of the
Earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
and like, but you even like have like the new 52 in DC, right? Like, okay, we are just restarting all our storylines flat.
Right.
Okay, that's it.
And from
It's like
what I
we're
understand
redoing it.
too is that even the cinema verse is separated in that way because I
Yeah,
know in DC you have kind of like the movies and then you have the shows, but those shows aren't connected to the movies.
yeah,
Hmm.
the Arrowverse.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they only did that because of the crossover thing. But it is the point. But the point you make, Dusty, is it goes back to what Andrew said in the beginning, is that as long as people are true to the central character of the characters, most people are going to be fine with it. And in superhero movies, that's much easier to do because the one thing that kind of remains consistent is the character. Like, so Batman is always super rich and people don't suspect, but then as Batman, he's gritty, determined, and incredibly well planned. And no matter which Batman you look at, they all have that in common.
Yes.
Superman,
Right.
as long as Superman is up there for justice and the American way and loves Lois Lane and rescues her, then that's fine. You know, that's what he has to do. If Superman turns up and just starts killing people, like just going flick, you're dead, and flick, you're dead, then people are going to go, hey, this ain't no Superman movie. But as long as he don't do that, that's fine. You're Superman, and we can live with it, even if your suit's a little different or you talk a little different. Mm,
Yeah.
that doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Like even the way he killed Zod in the movie didn't bother me.
Yeah,
I
but
know some people were bothered by that.
but killing Zod is very different from a because Superman has killed people before in the comics,
Right.
but Superman doesn't, for example, just run through a building and accidentally kill three kids and go, "Oh well, I did it for the greater good." Like that is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
Superman. Superman would never do that, like
Yeah. Of
never.
course. Yeah.
And so if he did that in a movie, people are going, "That ain't Superman. What you talking about, you freaking fool?" But if he picks up
Hmm.
a continent full of kryptonite in one movie, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's consistent with
Yeah.
his character.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All
Ah,
right.
it's gonna be
Well.
awesome.
Yeah. I'm super looking
Yep.
forward to this show, and yeah, like I was saying before, I'm super stoked to talk about each episode of this show as it comes out, like we did with
Yep.
Wheel of Time season 1 with you guys. So
Let's do
yeah,
it.
we're gonna have a lot to talk about coming this fall because we'll talk about Lord of the Ring. I think did you say, Dusty, that they're planning they probably, you think at least, will delay season 2 of Wheel of Time until after season 1 of The Rings of Power?
Well, originally, from what I remember, season 2 was supposed to air this month.
Oh, was it?
Originally in the original plan it was, but
Yeah, it
Oh, okay,
hasn't.
but it's already been
It's not
delayed,
been
you
due
mean?
to do that for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So of course they're not going to stick with that original plan because everything got delayed.
right.
Because of
So
that thing that begins with a C.
yeah, I don't
Yeah,
want to say
yeah,
anything because I don't want your video to get deleted.
yeah. They're really
So
fucking ridiculously crazy
Yeah,
with the algorithm about that now.
they are.
um, but yeah, it got held back. Of course, I don't want to see season two like a couple months after season one. I know they
Yeah,
started filming like right as soon as season one ended. When they stopped season one filming, they started season two like a month later.
right.
So they've been ready. This season is, I think, pretty much they're done filming because I know Brandon Sanderson noted that yeah, like the feedback from season one is not going to affect season two at all because
Oh
they're
yeah, I
already
remember him. I remember seeing him say that. Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
and I
already
know a lot
done,
of
basically.
people are hoping that season three will kind of, shuffle the lore back into what we kind of expect it to be at that point in the story. But a lot of people are saying, yeah, season three is going to be like the make or break moment of the season. We'll have to see how two is handled. And because, man, I'm hoping to get to season four, at least book four, because to me,
Yeah.
that's like a big hook if they're able to get to that season.
hmm
So I'm just hoping they have the leeway to get there. And once people see, oh man, this thing really expands out, um, and people are, I think, will be really happy, or at least going to start trying to compare it to Dune. I don't know how he's going to portray the waste and Isle culture, but that's
Yeah.
yet to be seen.
hmm
I
Yeah,
think it's
hopefully that'll
quite.
work out. Yeah.
People always. I remember when I first read it, and I'd never read Dune, by the way. When I read The Wheel of Time, and people like, oh yeah, the Elm, and like, the Aiel, sorry, totally like these these guys, Fremen, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
In
the
yeah,
Dune.
Fremen.
yeah.
And I was like, really? And then like I watched the Dune movie, and I'm like, these guys don't look like Aiel. Like they're hunting freaking giant
No,
sand and they've
the
got water suits. But yeah, I
yeah,
get it
yeah.
now more that
No,
I've read the
definitely.
book and I
The a
understand that
more
it's
apt
about that
a
kind
more
of.
apt comparison is the Aes Sedai and the oh shit
Yeah,
you
the,
know
the
who I'm
women with the
you know who I'm
voice.
thinking of, Dusty. Like yeah,
Bene
the
Gesserit.
Bene Gesserit. Yeah. They're like witches. They're like witches, and they're all females basically, or they're like the equivalent of women who can channel, just with kind of a
Very different powers.
very different and much softer magic system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say
It's
softer. It's just that their magic doesn't have the same impact. Like
Yeah,
their magic
that's a
is,
good point.
if you
Yeah,
want to call it magic, it's all about manipulation of people.
yeah,
Because well, they have the voice, and then they have
voice.
this kind of fighting style that's not. I guess it's described as being like they. The magic isn't even magic though. It's more about genetic manipulation and controlling like the chemical makeup in your body, right?
yeah,
Yeah, but it's kind of like magic though, like it, a little bit. Like
Kind of. They use a
it's
science
sci-fi
fiction-y way of describing
hand
what they do.
waviness, but like
Yeah.
yeah.
they in like when they have one and they gag her and they're like, because if she's ungagged she will just tell you what to do and you will just do it. I don't know
hmm
any genetic manipulation that can just make it so that when Andrew says to me, go shoot yourself in the face, that I do. That's a bit more
That's
than just
true.
How do they
tapping into
just,
my
I don't
genes.
know, because I know Andrew's read more of the books than I have. Do they ever describe like if there is a sci-fi way of how the voice works?
I don't think they do. Not as far as I can
Okay.
remember, anyway.
It's just super effective.
Yeah,
Okay. It's like the other stuff they say, oh yeah, they manipulate their levels of this hormone or this chemical or like the Bene Gesserit, they're trained to a degree where they can basically manipulate like the amount of chemicals sloshing around in their brain and through their body and all that
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure they give off a pheromone or something that instinctively makes everyone just want to listen to them, or something like that. But it's still hand wavium of the highest level.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like Dune is definitely fantasy sci-fi.
Yeah,
They don't.
fantasy
It's not
sci-fi.
hard at all.
Oh
No.
yeah. Yeah, for
It
sure.
doesn't want to be, right? As long as the
Yeah.
spice flows, as long as the spice flows.
Yeah, exactly. The spice must flow.
Agreed. It must. As Boba
Yeah.
Fett is finding out.
Yes.
I don't know, Andrew, when you go and get your dispensary stuff, do they name any of it Melange?
No, that would be hilarious though.
I was like, how have they not done that yet?
Oh, they're virtually guaranteed to be stoners who are Dune fans too, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I
Or
am
are there
sure.
any mind killers?
No, I haven't
Mine.
seen that either.
I'm
You
sure
know,
somewhere in the most recent human history it's called some illegal substance melange.
it'll be in France, right? Because
Yeah.
that's where the word comes from. So I bet people who mix. I bet in France for mixed drugs, where where like people have just mixed their own and not got something proper, which happens when people are just diluting stuff and maybe not doing it necessarily with a proper dealer. Melange, right? It's
Hmm.
mixed. 'Cause that's literally what melange means, mixed.
Well, I think there
Yeah.
was something called Spice here in the United States that they sold in like convenience stores. It was like kind of like a fake type of I don't even know that word, cannabinoid. What's
Cannabinoid?
the, yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
cannabinoid that they would sell at convenience stores as quote unquote potpourri, and then people would just like burn it and they like made them high somehow. And I think they actually called that spice, if I'm not
Oh
Watch
yeah.
mistaken.
this. Watch this video get deleted for misrepresentation of drug use in America. Thanks, Dustin.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving swiftly on.
Yeah. All
I
right.
can't believe how far off the rails we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
that was
know.
pretty derailed. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
That's all
No,
right.
I was involved. I was totally involved. I'm just like, my
Well, we
goodness,
talked
where are the
about a whole
rails?
bunch of other nerd related things as we do, so that's fun.
That's what we
All
always
right.
do. Sorry, guys.
Do you guys want to end this one here then and then go to our Silence for Shadows in the Forest of Hell
Yeah,
chat?
Yep,
I'm
go on
all
then.
for it.
Or Shadows for Silence. That's how I remember it now because the main character, you have to make it work in a way that it's whatever for a character's name. So Shadows doesn't work as well as a character name as Silence does. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Even though Shadow's the main character in American Gods.
Yeah, yeah, that's why it's
It is.
confusing. Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
one of the things that gave him the idea for Shadows for Silence in the First Fell is the name Silence. He's like he heard it as like a Puritans in America, like the Puritan family. Like once some of them they would call their daughters Silence, like their actual names. And he's like, I've got to use that. I've got to use that. But who would call their daughter Silence? And he's like, oh, I've got a story here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Her name is interesting too. But yeah, we'll get into that. All right. So yeah,
Let's do
you
it.
guys want to end this one here and then go to our
Yep.
next chat there? All right, cool.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
All
for
right.
sure.
Thanks for talking about this, guys. This is so fun to speculate about what will happen in the Rings of Power. And yeah, so thanks everyone for watching our speculations about what will happen given what happens in the Second Age in the Silmarillion. And click that like button and subscribe to the channel, share it everywhere, and check out my Patreon page too. Even $1 a month is greatly appreciated, and that's in the description of the video as always. And check out our chat that we're going to start right away on Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell, Brandon Sanderson's story in his Arcanum Unbounded collection that takes place in his fantasy Cosmere universe. And yeah, like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And look forward to watching Lord of the Rings of Power, and nerd out by reading all the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit book before then, and try to read Silmarillion, even though it's notoriously boring. And yeah, anything else you guys want to say before we end it there?
No, it's all good.
Yeah,
I'm
just
really
check.
excited.
Tomorrow we're going to talk about the wizard. Talk
Yes.
about / laugh at the wizard.
Yeah, I started watching that movie yesterday. It's so ridiculous.
Have you seen that, Tristram?
No, I'm now.
Do you
I'm
know
not
what we're
going
talking
to.
about? It's not a
No.
fantasy movie.
Oh, is it not?
Well,
It's
no,
about a
it's
video
about.
game wizard.
All right, let's pull it to an end because otherwise we're going to get sidetracked again.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
right.
Yeah, check out that on Dusty's channel tomorrow on Woke Centrist.
Okay.
All right, adios until a few minutes from now, guys.
All right.